Welcome to, or back to, Forgotten Hollywood, the channel where I take you back in time to show you the movies, shows, and actors that have faded over the years. Everyone I've met knows about the stereotypical cowboy, the hero in the white hat that defeats the mustache-twirling villain and saves the girl, town, orphanage, and so on. This image has been so firmly fixed in my mind for so long that when I actually started watching the early heroes of westerns, I was completely thrown. William Boyd starred as Hopalong Cassidy in 66 films, followed by a television series in the late 1940s, which was the first in a long line of network television westerns. Here was a man dressed in head-to-toe black, riding around and righting wrongs, often through undercover work or other forms of investigation and deception. No white hat, no mustache-twirling villain, and he almost never got the girl. He did ride a white horse, but I think that was more strategic. On black and white film, a group of riders look the same, except for the one on the white horse. Color contrast is very important for visual impact. Where Hoppy does fit the classic Western hero is in his personality. This is a character who is inherently good, though not perfect. In the film Borderland from 1937, Hoppy has to convince everyone that he was in league with cattle rustlers in order to infiltrate a gang, and by everyone that includes his closest friends. However, even pretending to be a bad guy, he can't stop himself from throwing a punch when someone hurt one of his friends. And then he has to quickly come up with the reason why he did that without breaking cover. It was a nice touch to demonstrate Hoppy's protective instincts. William Boyd's hero remained popular with fans from 1935 until the 1990s, long after Boyd's death. While I tried to find examples of the Western hero in film from the 50s and 60s, television dominated this genre. In fact, Warner Brothers' television branch had several shows all set in the West and starring heroic cowboys or frontier lawmen, sometimes both. One of the most common styles of this was the traveling hero. These were men who had no home base and just went from town to town having adventures. A great example of this is the show Cheyenne. Starting in 1955, Clint Walker played Cheyenne Bodie, a white man raised by the Cheyenne who travels from job to job, place to place, never really finding a spot where he can put down roots. What he does find is trouble left and right. Sometimes he stumbles upon someone in need. Other times trouble comes to him. However, being 6'6" has its advantages, and Cheyenne is able to hold his own in basically any fight. While his trade, in most episodes where he has a job, lends toward cattle, he has also worked as an army scout, drove a freight wagon, and even occasionally wore a tin star. With each job and each town, he finds someone to help. This is the definition of the roving hero, and what makes them so interesting. You can have a serious episode where Cheyenne is fighting man and nature to bring his cattle to market. Then a comical episode where the army asks him to go undercover as a song and dance man, when he neither likes to sing nor dance in public. The variety of situations has people tuning in to see where he will be and what he will be next. Like Hoppy, Cheyenne follows a moral code. He only kills when necessary and never goes further than needed in order to save lives. He doesn't enjoy hurting people, but he will if he has to in order to stop bad people from doing bad things. He was one of those intrinsically good characters of the West, not perfect, but wholly good. This was very common for heroes of the era, both in westerns and not. They were examples of virtue, someone kids could look up to. See another popular hero of the era for reference. On a rival network, the very same month Cheyenne went on the air, audiences were introduced to another classic hero of the West, a U.S. Marshal named Matt Dillon, played by James Arness. Gunsmoke began on September 10th, 1955, and a classic was born. This show differed from Cheyenne in that it was set in one location, with only the occasional episode leaving the limits of Dodge City, Kansas. The show lasted 20 years with most of the original cast, and is in part to blame for people believing that high noon gunfights were the norm in the Old West. In point of fact, shootouts were fairly rare, and Dodge City itself had only 15 murders from 1876 to 1885. Pretty sure that's less than some cities today have in a weekend. However, like any modern crime drama, a show with a lawman as a main character is going to heavily feature crimes. Murders to rustling, bank robbers to horse thieves. Marshall Dillon went after all of them. Now, there's a lot to say about the characters of Gunsmoke, but that's for another video. What I will say is that Matt Dillon also follows a moral code. He approaches the law fairly and does what is legally right, even if it means locking up a friend. However, if he does have to do that, he will move heaven and earth to get them out of jail again. He is careful to investigate, not wanting to arrest an innocent man, but comes down like a hammer on the guilty. He is the model of the ideal lawman found in a variety of shows in the 50s and 60s. Interesting note, James Arness was the brother of film legend Peter Graves. Another show that aired during this era took a different spin on the classic Western hero. He was sometimes a cowboy and sometimes a lawman, but most of all, he was a student. The show Sugarfoot starred Will Hutchins as Tom Brewster, a traveling law student who took college courses by mail and worked odd jobs to pay the bills. He got the nickname Sugarfoot due to his innocent nature and reluctance to wear a gun. This led people to believe that he wasn't skilled in firearms. Who would have guessed that he could empty a pistol into the area of a pocket watch at 20 paces? I include Tom on this list because he also fits the mold of the virtuous hero. Here is the world's nicest guy roaming the countryside and helping people with legal troubles. From accused murderers to a man charged with fraud, Tom will do his very best to see that the law is upheld. In this way, he's a lot like Matt Dillon, as he approaches things fairly and honestly. He is also like Cheyenne in his ability to find trouble wherever he goes, even working as a saloon cleaning man. Side note, the character of Tom appears in an episode of Cheyenne, along with the star of another Western from the Warner Brothers lineup, Ty Hardin's Bronco. Additionally, James Garner's Brett Maverick, also from a Warner Brothers property, has a cameo in a season 1 episode of Sugarfoot. In fact, it was standard practice for the stars to pop up here and there in other shows. Easter eggs at their finest. Moving into the 60s, we see an emergence of a new kind of Western with a new kind of hero, the spaghetti Western. While the Italians had been making movies set in the American West since the silent era, it was the director Sergio Leone that propelled the subgenre into stardom. His biggest success was a series of films starring Clint Eastwood that are commonly known as the Man with No Name trilogy. The tone of these films moves away from the moral lessons of American Western television, unless you consider it a moral lesson that if you abuse the innocent, you will die horribly. The Man with No Name, or rather no consistent name, was originally not intended to be the same character. However, the roles were filled by the same actor, using the same mannerisms, and wearing the same costume. Hard to argue that they are not the same man. The role of the man shifts from one film to the next, such as a drifter to a bounty hunter. But the feel of the films doesn't change. The hero targets one or more criminals, for various reasons, and fights to take them down, and all who support them, by any means necessary. This creates a much darker, more intense film. There's even a dash of nudity, something not seen in the previously mentioned titles. Yet the man with no name still fits the mold of the roving hero. Whether he stumbles upon trouble or goes looking for it, he has his code and he sticks to it. In a similar but slightly more tame film series, you have another of Clint Eastwood's iconic heroes, Dirty Harry. Now, at first glance, I don't think anybody would call Harry tame, but the intensity level of the films is much lower than that of the spaghetti western. Yes, people are killed and the swearing has increased, but the method and victims of the violence are much different. Set in the 1970s San Francisco, Dirty Harry follows a homicide detective named Harry Callahan. Due to the nature of his job, you know there will be blood. However, he doesn't limit himself to homicide. If he hears a bank alarm go off during his lunch break, he goes out there gun drawn. If he comes across a jumper on a ledge, he's the one who will go up and get them. As he tells his partner, "That's why they call me Dirty Harry. I get all the jobs nobody else wants." Just like Hopalong Cassidy, Cheyenne Bodie, Matt Dillon, Tom Brewster, and the man with no name, Harry follows his own code. He takes the hard jobs, doesn't kill unless necessary, stands up for the innocent, always willing to be there when needed, and goes as far as he has to get the job done. Harry may wear a badge instead of a cowboy hat, but he fits the mold of the classic Western hero. Thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on the Western hero? Can you think of any modern successors? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this sort of content. Also, click that bell to receive notifications. Let me know if there is another aspect of Hollywood's past that you would like to learn about, and I will catch up with you next time.